Okay, I'd like to bring to order the Brandon Heights Area School District School Board meeting, which is a special board meeting dated September 1st, 2020. Can I have the pledge of allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Brenner, roll call, please.
Mr. Beaver?
Here.
Dr. Carter?
Dr. Carter is not able to join us this evening. He was going to try to call him, but he had work this evening.
Mrs. Eisenberg? Here. Mrs. Henry? Here. Mrs. Young? Here. Mr. Sheets?
Here.
Mr. Weidman? Mrs. Walter? Yes. Mr. Swati?
Here.
8 present.
Okay, moving on to Roman numeral number 1, the Board of Directors report. Can I have a motion to approve the items under the Board of Directors report?
So moved. Second.
Sheets, Flanagan.
So, good evening, board members and audience, and all those that might be joining us virtually. We obviously have an important meeting here this evening, but before we get started, I thought it might be good just to set the tone and provide just an update where we are for the first 2 days of school, and give the board a feeling of how things are going. So, and of course the audience as well. So, just to provide you and kind of walk through the day, things have went very smooth. The first 2 days have been a wonderful experience for everyone, for the school system, for our students. The busing, the first 2 days went very smoothly in the morning. A few glitches we're working out, and when we think about what happened with busing this year, we had to take the regular bus route, break it into 2 bus routes. So that's 2 unique buses. Obviously, BCTC buses for our road tech students. We also have a kindergarten midday bus route. So a lot of moving parts with busing. With all those moving parts, again, a few small glitches, but went fairly well. As students came in, classes went really smooth this the first couple of days. The students were great about wearing masks. The teachers were engaged. It was just wonderful to see students in the classroom, connecting with teachers, engaged in learning. The afternoon, as we transition to the afternoon, the virtual learning pieces of it seem to go very well as well, in terms of students being able to get on, connect with their teachers in the virtual environment, whether that was first grade or all the way up through the high school ages. Having us be in a hybrid setting and being half of our students here, it allowed us to be in a really good position to be able to have half the students be able to follow our safety protocols. It actually brought almost a sense of home to the classes, to the buildings, because half the students were there. So that was a really positive in terms of the student body as well. They've been great. And I think honestly, I'm excited to be here. I was talking to a parent today. It was almost the opposite. Usually kids are like, oh, I have to go to school. This time the kids seem to be really eager and excited to be coming back, because it gives them a chance to see their friends and be connected, since in some cases March since they've had that opportunity. From the position of kindergarten, that's going extremely well. We have an AM kindergarten session, and then they go home on a bus, and then the PM come in on a separate bus, and then we have a separate PM kindergarten, and that is going extremely well. The kindergarten teachers are doing a great job connecting with the students, doing that half-day program, adjusting from what they would typically do in a full day, and that process is going really well. And again, with half the students, they're able to still get through a lot of the content and process. So kindergarten's really going really well. Our BCTC students, those that are in BCTC, they are following the schedule that they are doing here in school. So if they're in school Monday, Tuesday, they're going to BCTC in the afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, and then vice versa on Thursday, Friday. And that seems to be going very well as well. From a cleaning process, we were really lucky to have our paraprofessionals help with the cleaning process. And so the typical day, what happens is we have cleaning supplies within the classrooms. So teachers, if they're able and they're willing, are able to wipe down the classrooms throughout the day. But then after everyone leaves, the paraprofessionals who would be normally working all day help out with the cleaning process. And so they have been a huge asset to this whole process. They go in, they wipe down all the hard surfaces. They wipe down the handrails, the seats with disinfectant wipes. And then once that process is done, our custodians come in and they clean all the floors, they can take the trash out, they do a final inspection of the room, make sure everything is clean, tidied up, and then they go through with a disinfectant mister and disinfect all the rooms. After all that's done, we seal the rooms with a sticker that says this room has been clean and sealed, clean and disinfected, it's sealed with a sticker, and then that sticker is not broken until the teacher comes in the next morning. So it's a really good assurance that all those classrooms have been cleaned and have been disinfected before teachers come in the next day. So, as a recap at a high level, by all accounts, things are going really well. And I thank the board for trusting us in this process. We've had a lot of conversations to get to this point, a lot of board meetings, but I really am appreciative of the plan that we have in place. I'm appreciative of our administrative staff, of our teachers, and of our support staff all coming together to provide this opportunity. And most thankfully to our families for being patient over the summer, and to our students that have just completely gravitated this and doing a great job through this process. So, this evening, as we look towards the agenda, the board has called this special meeting tonight as an opportunity to discuss the data metrics which are incorporated in our health and safety plans. The two items for discussion this evening are to evaluate the data metrics, to look at the data metrics that the Pennsylvania Department of Education has prescribed, and to use this and to evaluate the data metrics we have in our health and safety plan, which is currently 50 out of 100,000, as our gauge to move from a yellow to a red phase, and the discussion and the board agenda specifically to move that from 50 to 100 to 100,000. So that is agenda item 1. We'll tackle both of these items separately, but that is the first one we'll address first. And then the second item is to evaluate how we are looking at the data when we make these decisions. And so currently what's in our health and safety plan is to evaluate the data on a 2-week rolling average. So we will use the data that comes in this week plus the data last week, average those together, and that's what we'll be using as our number, as that gauge of currently as it exists 50, but as we're discussing, going to 100. We're looking to change that from a 2-week rolling average to a 4-week rolling average to help mitigate some of those spikes and valleys that might happen with the cases that would occur in the county. And all this data that we're talking about, just so everyone is on the same page, is all the Berks County data that's released by the Department of Education in the COVID cycle. Mr. Masi, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so the first agenda item is to approve updated metrics of the Brandywine Heights Area School District. We are looking to consider going from a 50 to 100 100,000 for safe reopening of the school and education process. I'd like to turn it over to the public now to address the board in a forum here. We do have a microphone here to your left or right, and I ask that each member that comes forward represents themselves, obviously the name, what township you're from. That would be appreciative. And then just understand that I'm going to ask for about a 5-minute time frame just to kind of keep things rolling. I will let you know when the 5 minutes is up, and if there is the chance to continue your thoughts, please do so, just to make room for the next person to come and talk. I would ask also that if you come up to the microphone, please, give room. Let's not congregate at the microphone, so maybe that 6 feet distance, for the next person that's coming up. So feel free to come up. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Yes, sir.
My name is Sean Sterner. I'm from Rockland Township. Brandywine Heights School District board members. Let me first start by saying our family loves Brandywine Heights School District. We believe in this school and the community is the best in the entire area and has provided wonderful educational and extracurricular opportunities for our children. We feel fortunate to live in the district and recognize the dedication and commitment to excellence exemplified by the administration, instructors, staff, and school board. I'm here to express our dismay and concern over rumors that may be we may be putting a halt to in-person instruction, potentially those sports or extracurricular activities. We understand and appreciate the challenges caused by COVID-19 virus. However, the risks of holding regular in-classroom instruction and extracurricular activities so vital to students to learn and grow is less than the alternative. In fact, the CDC has stated the same. It is incomprehensible that given the low mortality risk this virus presents, there's consideration is being given to canceling in-person education. As a matter of fact, in the state of Pennsylvania, 0 people have died from the age of 0 to 24. It was difficult enough for our graduating seniors to experience school closures this past March. It prevented them from experiencing everlasting memories and achievements, and they will never have those opportunities back. We understood the rationale for that decision to close schools then. The uncertainty of the virus at that time made it the difficult but prudent choice. We get it, and we supported that initial decision. However, things are different now. Epidemiologists and other health professionals know much more about the virus now. Progress is being made towards therapeutics, and vaccines are expected to be available within months. Hospitals are not being overrun, and continually updated preventative measures, including PPE and social distancing guidelines, are creating safe environments by helping people avoid infection. In short order, the diminishing risk from this virus will be gone, but the damage of not opening our schools and keeping in-person instruction could potentially last forever. No, this is nowhere near similar to what occurred in March. And though there are risks to opening and staying open, they can be mitigated. Damage of not having in-school instruction and activities far outweighs the alternative. Educators and especially board members must seriously consider the irreversible damage to not only students, but the entire education model as a whole. Students who enroll in cyber school or transfer to charter or private schools due to our closures may never return to Brandywine Heights Area School District. The result will be not only an immediate loss in talent, but also fiscal and structural damage that will impact the district and its taxpayers not just this year, but for many years to come. Furthermore, instructors, aides, and support people who are rightfully concerned about health and safety should also themselves weigh not returning to work against their long-term employment prospects. Fewer students ultimately means fewer staff. There will most certainly be a decline in students if the school does not hold in-class instruction. Staffing and programming cuts will be necessary. This will undermine the Brandywine Heights Area School District education program. Working adults all must accept various levels of risk in today's work environment. Essential workers in a variety of fields continue to find safe ways to work throughout this outbreak. School is no different. The education of all children should not be sacrificed because a portion of the staff are unwilling to accept that risk, especially when they have been provided with options such as a medical sabbatical, the use of sick days, and FERPA. In-person education is essential, especially for the most vulnerable, and staff are essential workers. Based on my research and looking at the data available in the county and here locally, we are far exceeding the recommendation by the state and by the great Dr. Fauci, which was to go 100% virtual if our community around us hits 100 cases per 100,000 residents. Today, Berks County sits at a 2-week average of only 51.9 per 100,000 residents. The zip codes in our school district sit at 23.46 per 100,000 residents. You all have worked very hard to put together the district's health and safety plan. I applaud your efforts. I know firsthand that you are in a thankless job and that no matter what direction you go in, you will always have somebody upset with you. All we are asking is for you to give our kids a chance and give the plan that you created a chance to work. In closing, I ask, please be courageous, be creative, figure out how we can help Brandywine Heights Area School District stay open in a hybrid model, at the very least, for in-person education and extracurriculars. Failure to do so will have long-term negative impacts on our school district, instructors, our community, and most importantly, the children. Especially the most vulnerable who may find safety and solace in school. These negative impacts are not opening, these negative impacts of not opening will linger on after the next few months. Think long term, not just for the moment.
You're fine. That is 5 minutes. Mr.
I'm done.
You're done? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Strain. Anyone who's next? Please come forward. Hello, sir.
I don't know that I can compare that. I really appreciate his thoughts. My name is Jerome Pino. We live in Long Swamp Township. And I guess I'll just do a little ad lib here. I do want to thank everybody. I know you guys worked very hard to get here, to make all the decisions that you have. I really appreciate it. And I guess where I'm coming from is working a lot with youth in our church. And it was interesting to see over the summer, as we started gathering again in person, how the excitement was building with many of those students about schools reopening. And then as we got further into July and into August, as the word started changing, that a lot of the school districts one at a time started to go or make the announcement excuse me, the announcements that they were going to go virtual. Just to hear some of their disappointment, some of their I want to say sadness, because I think we sometimes downplay as much as students would love to say how much they hate school. I think that what they saw in the spring with the shutdowns was how integral that was to them. And I think they really missed that. And we tried a lot of virtual stuff, meeting with the youth through Zoom and everything. And it was something where it was great for the first couple of weeks, and then you just watch the numbers go down because it just doesn't have that same impact. It's not reaching them because they're not making that connection. I think right now there's so many youth that are missing those connections that the school and the district and sports just provides for them, and in the interaction with the teachers, that just doesn't happen over a Zoom call. There's so many teachers and administrators that there's just a heart for the students, and they know when those students are hurting, and they know when they need that attention, and that doesn't come through on a remote call. And I guess where I'm coming from is just, I would hate to see, after all the efforts that everybody has gone through here, to so quickly say, hey, let's shut things down right away. I think I love the idea of that moving to a 4-week rolling average. I think that's great, because there might be a little spike, but I guess I would just like to say that I would encourage you to definitely embrace that for not only, I'm not even going to say for the parents, but really for the students. I think they really need that connection of all, of any of you that may be teachers, forgive me, I don't know who is and who isn't, but just what the district and what the school offers to them. I think they're missing that. I think they're hurting. We even had some kids who, we had one who attempted suicide just because, fortunately, they didn't. That was not successful, but that really drove that point home of how much school and those interactions really do mean to them. So I would ask them to just consider that in your decision tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me, sir, you said your last name was? Pino. Thank you. Okay. I have a list of people here, so I'll start calling names. Yes, go ahead, sir. Hello.
Ryan Olshow, Rockland Township. I'll start by saying I'm not as well researched, refined, or as articulate as the first two speakers, but I'll be brief. I have two young kids, elementary kids, one starting kindergarten this year, one entering the third grade. As was mentioned earlier, my kids are and looking forward to hopefully continuing in-person school as much as possible. You got the educational standpoint as well as the social interaction standpoint, which I would say, depending upon your age, might be just as important as the educational component. I would hope and encourage that we are able to stay in person as long as possible, and hopefully don't go what I would consider reverting back to a more virtual and harmful schedule going forward. Speaking for myself only, I wish it would be all full-time back like normal. I know you guys are putting a box, and that's not going to happen probably anytime soon, but I wish our school school district would try to move forward with getting back to a quote normal school session as soon as possible. So hopefully that's considered as the other two speakers also mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Julia Lawford, I'm in District Township. I like a couple of questions for you guys. I think you're going to go over everything once you finally take your votes. I know that I would like to know why we're not following the CDC guidelines. What made you guys decide to come down in that? I'd like to know the answer to that. I'd also like to know why we're not staying with the consistency with our students to make sure that they can stay in school longer. I don't think that it is a good consideration to have them flip-flopping into this hybrid or virtual that would not keep them going well in school. I think we'll have bad grades, students not coming in, not going online. I'd also like to find out what your plan is to help keep with good routines for them if we do stay in hybrid, or if you are going to be going to this virtual. I'd like to know what the plan is to come back to hybrid, or then to go back to a green stage if you get to that point. What is the highest point for our spikes that you guys are considering if we go for this 4-week structure? If we're going to be counting 4 weeks, what's the highest spike that you would like to not see or see before you would consider us to go virtual? And would you consider looking for those spikes before we say we're going to go virtual? I think that's it.
Okay, can I just read back, because I don't have a long list.
That's okay.
Number one, why are we not following CDC guidelines? Is that the first question?
I'd like to know why we're not following them.
And then, keep going, because I don't think I have a second question.
I have to go back.
That's okay, I'm just.
I'd like to know why we're not staying more consistent with our children staying hybrid. So I guess that kind of goes with what our vote is for today, to keep them in a better routine.
Okay.
And then the last one's more with the spike. I know that we're voting to go back up to that 100 with the CDC. But what's the highest spike that you guys would consider, even if we do go over that, like we did right now, we are still considered to be in school. If that happens again, I'll be prepared for that spike so that we don't have to have these meetings and, you know, are we gonna be in school or are we not gonna be out of school to stay with the consistency? Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Lawler, we will try to address those once the board comments. Okay.
Now for a question. I was interested in finding out how, from a data metric side, when you say that, is there any consideration being made for when we see spikes, where those spikes are occurring? Are those spikes throughout, let's say, within the age bracket, within the high school ages? Is it middle? Is it like middle age? Is it nursing homes? I was just wondering if you could answer, if you guys are taking that into consideration, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Mr. Moss, that seems to be a point of confusion. Maybe we should answer that question before we proceed on in public comment. That might actually clarify some of the questions that we're about to receive. So, and I'm sorry, Gerald?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Julia, correct? I don't have my glasses on because I can't see when I breathe. Okay, so with the spikes that you guys are talking about, that spike, that information is coming from the Department of Education. That guideline is available, I believe, on our website for the school reopening and on our health and safety plan. And what it shows, or what it states, is that if we have less than 10 cases in Berks County, new cases per week based on a rolling average of X number of weeks, right? That's part of our conversation tonight, to decide if X is going to be 2 weeks or 4 weeks. If we have less than 10 cases, new cases, we can go back to school full time, all right? If we have between 10, and right now it's 50 cases, because that's what we initially had our conversation 2 weeks ago about, or the state guideline, which is 100 cases, we would stay in a hybrid model, all right? If we exceed 800 new cases in the county, we would go red, and we would just be completely shut down. We would go completely virtual. So your question about the spikes is, you know, right now as it stands, we would go from a hybrid model, which we're in right now, to a virtual model if the board decides to stay at 50 tonight. If the board decides to follow the state guidelines, then we would move to 100. Okay, and then also for just to kind of answer real quick, the following CDC guidelines, we're following the guidelines of the state. So we're following the state guidelines that, you know, the numbers that were issued from the Department of Education. Yeah, did I hit that right?
Yep. Do you want to explain the 4-week rolling average?
Correct. Okay, so 4-week rolling average. Right now, as it stands, we take our rolling average. So we take this week and last week. The average number of new cases that had, or the number of cases from last week, the number of cases from this week, we average them together, you know, simple arithmetic, add them together, divide them by 2. If that number comes out to more than 50, school would shut down. What we're also going to be conversing about tonight is changing that rolling average from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. Because we feel that that's, or some of us feel, or the logic behind it is that if we have a 4-week rolling average, we're less prone to like a very severe spike, right? So if we have a nursing home in Tupton, or we have a nursing home in Reading that sees a huge uptick of cases based off of testing, we're gonna have those other 3 weeks to kind of isolate out that high random. The other side of the coin though is it also isolates out low randoms as well. So it's a base on average. So those are really the 2 conversation points tonight, but hopefully that gave some answer to y'all's questions. Yeah.
And that 4-week rolling average will wind up being every Friday, Andrew, correct?
That's correct. The Department of Health releases the information on a Friday.
So as we get through like 4 weeks, you know, I see comments and people asking me about it. Once we get through 4 weeks, it doesn't start all over again. It just goes to the next Friday, roll in the last 3 weeks. Move a week out, you roll in the last 3 weeks.
or if we stay in the 2-week model, it's the week before. A lot of people were confused with that and were asking me the question via text and email and blah, blah, blah. So just so everybody's on the same page how that all works. Every Friday there will be, if there's spikes, there will be decisions made.
And then with that 4-week rolling average, say it exceeded and you shut down or you went all virtual, would that be a certain time span? Would that be just until the next Friday where you reevaluate again?
That
That would be till the next Friday, so until the number came back down below either 50 or 100, depending on what the will of the board is this evening. You know, whatever gets below that number, school would start back up.
Okay, so it could feasibly just be a week. Well, I should say it would be a minimum of 1 week, depending upon.
Correct, depending on how far out that number through the average, yes.
And realize those numbers, if I'm correct, Andrew, don't come out until like 1 o'clock on like a Friday afternoon. So 1 o'clock Friday afternoon, we get the message, Andrew draws up a plan to send it out to you guys. And, you know, may that be that we're in yellow, we need to switch to red. By Monday, you could possibly be in red, just so everybody's aware of that.
I'm going to ask that we continue public comment and then we can discuss this. I'd like to get through some of the public comments.
Okay, sorry.
There's a lot here, it's okay. I just want to make sure that we're keeping on task here. So, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Karen Polinsky from Top 10. I did not circle yes or no because I wasn't sure.
What was your last name again?
Polinsky.
Lindsay.
So my concern, and I appreciate, like everybody else said, everything that you, the board, the faculty, and the staff have done for our kids. This rolling, and I know we have to look at metrics, but this constant worry of change. I'm fortunate enough that I work from home, so moving from a hybrid to a full virtual or to a full in school does not affect me as much as a lot of our population, working full-time out of the house, having young children in kindergarten, pre-K, having to balance childcare, busing, you know, those needs. At the drop of a hat on a Friday, we could learn that we're going red, and then what do these parents who have to find alternate childcare for their kids do? I think we need to continue with this 100, you know, per 100,000, and keep our kids in school, because I'll tell you what, my 5th grader is a completely different person since being in school just 2 half days. So that's all.
Thank you.
Hello, Walter Sahadak, Rockland Township. As everybody else said, thank you for all you've done and putting these plans together and getting the kids back into school as much as they can make happen. I'd just like to comment on 2 things. One, potential change to virtual and the effect that'll have on the BCTC students, with the fact that BCTC is following whatever the school district's plan is, and by its nature, BCTC is a very hands-on learning experience. So, well, right now, at least they're getting in there 2 days a week. To change those students to full virtual will have a real effect on them, because they're not able to get into their shops and do their hands-on activities. And then the second thing I wanted to comment on was I'm fully in support of moving the metric up to the 100 from the 50, but just that it is a little misleading, and something that from my reading, we should be taking into account from the Department of Education is the percent positive as well. Obviously, over these last 2 weeks, we've seen, you know, an increase in the incidence per 100,000. Part of that is because there was over 500 additional tests done within the county between the 2 weeks, a difference of 500. The actual percent of positive tests actually dropped from 4.9 to 4.8%. you would expect the more tests that are done and the fact that they are testing individuals who have a reason to suspect that they've been exposed or have, they're not just randomly testing people, it's people who are expected to have a reason. You would expect the number to go up, but the percentage shows that it's actually, the percentage of positive tests have actually dropped. So I think that's something that number needs to be looked at along with the incidents per 100,000. Thank you.
Hello.
My name is Jeremiah McCarty. I'm from Long Swamp Township. My biggest question and concern, I am definitely taking into consideration the value of in-person education. I believe it's very important. And my biggest concern isn't exactly what your number is. It is, how do I know that you're going to be sticking with whatever plan is decided on? If you decide on it being 100, and then in 2 weeks we get to that line in the sand, how do we know you're not going to hold another meeting and change the number? Because from my understanding, we should be in red right now. Whether or not I support that, I would like to know that what you decide on is going to be what actually happens. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like more comments, please come down. I know there's people in other rooms, if others want to cycle through. If you want to maybe kind of get them in the hallway, we can bring them down one at a time. Yes, sir.
Chris Rarick, from Long Swamp Township. Okay, so I have a couple comments. So I, like most, everyone has spoken thus far tonight. So agree with the value of in-person education, right? And I think it's good to have our children back in school for a variety of reasons. So that said, there's also talk about consistency, right, and maintaining that. Similar to the comments made just prior, I think if you look back at the history of how we got here, there's a pattern of very concerning behavior being exhibited. Okay, so a few weeks ago, right, there was a meeting in this room where the board and the administration talked about the virtues and the hundreds of hours that went into a plan, how wonderful it was. You retained St. Luke's to provide guidance, right? You developed the best plan possible. And I think your plan was adaptive, it was forward-thinking, and it was to be commended, unlike other school districts around the region, right? You actually made an adaptive plan, and that was clearly communicated, right? The data's all public, everyone can go out and take a look at it, right? So that was approved on the 3rd, okay? Following that, okay, after months of work, you gave the families of the district 7 days to make a commitment for 5 months. 7 days, okay, to make a commitment for 5 months. After that, what happened? So there was a meeting on the 17th to change the plan. You changed the plan on the 17th, and then you pushed back the start of school by a week. Change, change, change. Okay, and then on Friday of last week, so you chose to blatantly ignore the plan that was put in place. The number was over 50. Now, whether or not I agree with 50 is irrelevant. You put a plan in place. This is about integrity, commitment, and leadership, okay? And dealing with the outcome of what you approved. The reality is when the going got tough, you didn't want to face the music, okay, for the decision that you made. That's not leadership. That's not leadership at all. You live with the decisions that you made, okay, and you own up to it. That's what happens. You don't constantly change, okay? And after forcing families to commit to 5 months, just on a whim, recklessly, choose you want to do something else. Okay, if I did that in my line of work, I'd be fired, okay? So families have to be accountable to the decisions that we made, okay? And for the school district to not be accountable to those decisions now, to just be able to change on a whim after you've made a commitment, that's just bad policy, okay? That's bad politics, that's bad schooling, okay? And it turns this place into a circus, not an educational institution. The board had all the opportunity, and you did, okay, before the school started, to evaluate the data from the state and make a decision. You chose not to change, okay? The outcome of your plan at 50 was inevitable. You can track the data, it's publicly available, you can look at the trends. I did it, I made a decision to go one way or the other based on knowing what the outcome of that plan would be. I'm certain I'm not alone, okay? So yes, it's about doing the right thing for the kids, but it's about integrity, commitment, and trust. Because the pattern of behavior says that the school district and the board cannot be trusted. That's a bad place to be in. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Bronco. I'm from Rockland Township. It's really nice to see a lot more people out this time around. Last time there were barely any folks here when we had the last meeting, so I appreciate everyone coming out. And again, my thanks for allowing me to speak and all the work you're doing. Really appreciate it. So I guess tonight I'm almost here to. I thought about this a lot to talk about, the narrative that we choose to write ourselves. Because clearly, the last gentleman views the decisions that were made and the flexibility and the growth mindset as potentially a downfall and a negative, which I can see that. I've been on both sides of the coin in my profession. And however, I look at it as a growth opportunity. I look at our board as a growth mindset, a mindset that is willing to adapt and change and modify policies in the best interest of our children, not necessarily what makes them feel good or look better or not. And really, when right now we're looking at a society and a newsreel that is basically choosing and picking their own narrative. It's like, what do you want to decide today? And you guys have to make decisions based on no direction whatsoever. And so now you're changing your decision is absolutely amongst your prerogative and your ability to make those decisions because you made them based on limited data before and an ever-changing environment, and now you're adapting and you're changing. And so I don't look at that as a negative, I look at that as a positive. I look at that you're showing our youth that we should be in a growth mindset and we should be able to adapt and flex to change and be able to accept these things and roll with it, not shut it down and become on a fixed mindset. We talk about that a lot. These are just bigger lessons than we learn besides math and reading. And I don't think we're putting our children at risk. I've said that the last time I spoke. I'm very confident in my school district, in my teachers, for everyone to make the right decisions in the best health care of my children. And I really think we stand at a precipice and we really need to make the right decision for our children. And we need to take the narrative of hope, optimism, change, perseverance, coexistence with something that we are learning new every single day. The reason we made these choices before is because we didn't have the data. We didn't have raw, real data. Yes, we had numbers that we could look at, absolutely. That was coming out all the time. We had numbers to look at, but really no specific guidance on how to interpret those numbers and what it actually looked like in reality. And that's a big difference. And so I really implore the board to take that mindset of, like I said, hope, compassion, gearing toward our children. People will forget that you changed their mind because our children will have had a better experience and a better learning outcome. So really, I again, I thank you. I push for the 100 because we're kind of exactly where I kind of anticipated we would be 2 weeks ago in front of this board. So again, I appreciate it, and I just wanted to stand in front of you and thank you for all you do and support the decision to move forward with in-school and hybrid. Thank you.
Hello.
Good evening, my name is Michael Housman. I live in Long Swamp Township. I have two children, Kay and third grade. Some of you know me, some of you don't. First off, you guys are in a thankless position, so as everybody else has said, we appreciate the efforts, we appreciate the work that you guys do. Based on what everybody has said, I'm going to stand with Craig on my position as most agreeable to what Craig relayed to you. As far as the 100, we completely agree with the 100 number for a threshold. I know some others have expressed how their kids were excited and overjoyed to go back to school. My kindergartner was over the world to get into school. My third grader, again, some of you know McKenna, she was equally as happy to get back in. So I think there is value to the kids being in school face-to-face with the teachers, one-on-one. I only have a couple of questions that I would like you to consider beyond moving to the 100. I personally, or my family and I, we don't quite understand the reason for grades 1 and up going on the half-day schedule versus a full day for those 2 days that they're actually in full education. To me, I don't see what the difference is from a 4 to 5 hour day versus an 8 hour day. So, and the other option, or the other thing I would like you to consider is when you talk about the statistics, how they come out on a Friday at whatever it be, 1, 2 o'clock. You guys all realize how incredibly difficult, and for some families it's impossible, to make those changes to our schedules and create a place for our children to go on a dime come Monday. So I would like you to at least consider potentially a week delay. So if the numbers come out Friday and they're over the acceptable threshold that you decide on, is it possible to say, okay, the Monday a week from now, we're going to go full virtual, to give families the opportunity to make preparations and make the appropriate plans to get their kids where they need to go. Because as other people have said, some of the families in the area don't have the means, whether it be financially, family, whatever. Some families are probably going to have to leave their jobs. If their kids are home all the time, virtual, I'm sure there are some parents out there that are going to have to quit their jobs. So how do you expect a parent to go in Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock and tell their employer, I have to quit in 48 hours? It just puts an undue burden on us. So I would like you to at least consider maybe a 1 week delay in that going red. Write it out for the next week, let families make preparations, and then we can all move forward. So that's all I really have to say. One additional item. I know Mr. Pottinger and I have had multiple conversations. I think this man's commitment and his dedication to the school district is exemplary. I hope you guys realize that. I've received phone calls from him at 9 and 10 o'clock at night on items that have happened at school. He gets back to everybody, and I'd like to think that his leadership trickles down through all the teachers and everybody else underneath him. And so far with the children that I have in the district, I have seen that. So I just hope you guys realize that. And I trust him, if he thinks that the 100 is a reasonable number to keep our children and our faculty and our staff and everybody else in our schools safe, I trust that man to lead our district in the safest and most practical way to get the kids the best education possible, given the current situation. Thank you.
My name is Nicole Pacey, I'm from Albertus. I wanted to push for the 100,000 also. I think in-school education and the safety of our children is a great factor, but I think our education of our children is also a great factor. And my daughter, I mean, she even wanted to come tonight because she wanted to express that interaction with teachers is such a big connection, and it allows them to understand the curriculum and the education a lot more than virtual. So I think the 2 days in school is definitely a great advantage for kids. And I greatly appreciate everything you guys are doing and the concerns and the steps you're taking to make sure the kids are definitely safe when they come here. But I definitely do think that the education and that interaction with teachers are definitely a great help for the kids. And I think that you need that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Eritz. I last met you at the last school board meeting. Good evening, Mr. Pottinger. I would like to first express my deep gratitude and appreciation to all of the parents and community members who have expressed their support for the faculty and who recognize our professionalism and our importance in this community. We value that, and we thank you. I am here to represent members of the faculty who are concerned about the moving of the established board policy regarding the metrics that you all established were the safe and sound metrics to put forth. These metrics were used when faculty members made decisions about their choice whether they were going to stay in the building or to take sabbaticals or take the FFRCA. And we have several concerns about why the district is now choosing to consider moving those metrics. Because it doesn't seem like it is a decision rooted in the policy or the science. We are already in the metrics that are above what were established. And so the concern is the board going to bend every time we reach the new metric to pressure that they're going to up the ante and choose to put people's health and safety in more danger because it feels good to be in school. So, I understand everybody is excited to have a taste of normalcy, but at what cost? These are just concerns that we would like you to consider and think about. We also were curious if you had read the email that we have sent you, if you considered any of those concerns that we had forwarded to you. That is just something that we are asking if you were able to do. Conversely, when kids and teachers start getting sick, are you going to move the metric numbers in the opposite direction? If you are so willing to bend your established policy. Finally, we would just like to ask that you be proactive with your policy. Stand by your hours-long debated policy and make a choice for the safety of our students, our staff, our faculty, our administrators, and our families. Thank you.
I wanted to let you know that we did address your concerns at our last board meeting. You had already walked out the door, so you missed us addressing those concerns.
I apologize. None of my colleagues said you did, but thank you for saying that you did. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Erin Clark. I live in Rockland Township.
Can I start with just a quick question? Because we keep talking about thresholds and increasing the case counts per the 100,000. My understanding is that the 100 per 100,000 cases is a guideline set by the state, correct? Is it a mandate, a recommendation, a guideline? Because we keep using words, and I just wanted to know, if we increase it to that, is it the final stop? Does the school district then at that point have the ability then to say, oh, we're gonna go to 150, or is that the top of as far as we can go? Because everybody seems to have some concern that we're gonna keep changing the game. I'm 100% for us going to that 100, but then I think we also need to, is that as far as we're gonna go? Make a statement that that's as far as we're willing to go for parents. I, as a parent, and with 3 kids in this district, made the decision to send my children back. I weighed the pros and cons. I've accepted the risks, my family has accepted the risks, and my kids have. And I'm willing to take that on, and I'm just encouraging you to relook at this, revisit this. I'm encouraging you to increase the limits for data into the 4 weeks. I'm encouraging you to then increase it to the 100 per 100,000, because I do feel that for me, in my situation, the benefits outweigh the risks right now. My kids need to be in school. While I would love to say I kill it at teaching math, I don't. You know, I am not at all good at it. I recognize that in addition, I need help. They need to see a teacher. They need to have that one-on-one interaction, teaching them, helping them, guiding them. So when they come home to me for those virtual days, they have a little bit more of an understanding as to what we're doing at home. That helps me. I then don't feel like I'm failing so much at my job. Because in addition to having a job as being a parent and teaching, that's now a hybrid format, I have a real job, you know? So I can only do my best, but sometimes it's a struggle. And I feel like this hybrid option gives me a better chance at keeping my kids successful and helping them become better, staying better students. So please, I would just encourage you to just look at the options and consider it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to agree comment. Hoping my comments aren't taken negatively, being that both my kids, I said, are in kindergarten and 3rd grade here. For the faculty, and again, I say this with utmost respect for what you do, both my parents are teachers, my sister and mother-in-law are also, but many of us, and I won't say many of us with other jobs, don't have the opportunity for sabbatical. You gotta go to work. So if safety is based off of numbers and statistics, we're not running a nursing home, we're running the school. If you look at the statistics put out by the state for the age groups, they are minimally affected as compared to the higher age groups in nursing homes. I find it, I understand you guys are limited in what you can do, certainly, but I would put, if it was up to me, I'd push 200-300 per 100,000. It's mind-numbingly frustrating to me that, an outbreak at a nursing home in Berks County somewhere will affect whether my child comes to school or not. So again, I don't know if anyone agrees, and it doesn't matter, kind of venting, if you will, but that's my thought. If you're worried that the faculty is that worried about the safety, so from what it sounds like, you had the opportunity for sabbatical. A lot of myself, I would have a much more black and white choice. Get another job or come to work. There's already safety protocols in place here and most other places. So thank you.
Okay, I'd like to ask if there's any more first comments. I know there's a lot of people on my list in front of me that have said yes, that they would like to speak. I'm asking that if you'd like to speak, please come to the microphone. if you want to, go ahead, Mr. Stratton.
This is one to the board, to echo what this gentleman was saying. I think the faculty also, I have a wife that's a teacher. She doesn't teach Brandywine, but she's a teacher as well. So I live this life as well. There are avenues that your teachers have that other people in the workplace don't have. They have to make a decision for themselves as to whether this is for them or not. To me, being a teacher is a great opportunity, but at the end of the day, if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel comfortable, then you need to make a personal decision for yourself that should not be shouldered on, the burden should not be put on the children of this school district. If you're not comfortable, find something else to do. It's as simple as that. There's 3 ways you can deal with this as a faculty member. That's a lot more than anybody else in this room probably has. I just want to remind you guys that you guys have put a plan in place, and the state has put a plan in place that allows for them to consider other options. And the final option that they have is, because of the circumstances, go find something else to do. But at the end of the day, we should not be making decisions that is going to affect all the kids in this school district based on somebody's level of uncomfortableness in the workplace.
Anyone else? Here we go, got another second comment.
No running, please.
Just on the number thing, just so everyone's clear, like, that's gonna change forever. That number's gonna change forever in a day, because it needs to. Because as we get better, and as we're getting better at dealing with this, and as we get vaccines, that number will forever, ever change. So that number cannot be fixed and or stagnant. You know, it has to change and has to adapt so we can adapt and we can grow. So I mean, that number, I think, you know, I've heard some, obviously we're talking about it, but I don't want us to get lost in it. You know, because it's going to change. It could change 2 weeks from now. A month from now, the CDC could say, hey, it's gone. Let's go back to school. Is it going to happen? Probably not. You know, but I mean, like, that needs to be an ebb and flow and never change. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christopher Love. I live in the borough of Clapton. And I guess my thing is, I'm trying to say avoid going all virtual. And I'm looking at the end of last school season and already 2 days into this school season. I've already seen 2 things happen with my kids in my household. I got 3 kids in the school district. If we go all virtual and the kids are having a problem with something, not understanding something, I understand, yes, they can email the teacher, but an email is also like a text. You can send it one way and interpret it another way. And my stepdaughter, she had that issue last year. She's like, I emailed the teacher, she emailed me back, yes, but I'm still not understanding what I'm supposed to be learning here. And the same thing tonight with my son. He had an assignment to do, excuse me, and he was having a problem with his homework. And he emailed the teacher, and he actually worded it, I'm gonna say wrong, what he was trying to figure out. And when I got home from work, it took me 10 minutes to figure out what he was trying to ask. So how do we expect these children to get help they need if we're 100% virtual? At least if we're at least hybrid, even 1 day a week that these kids can see the teachers. The teachers can explain it to them better in a way that these children can understand it versus an email or maybe even virtual, because the student may not ask and step up if they're on a computer. I know myself, I've done these meetings virtual and I absolutely hate them. I'd rather sit in a meeting for 3 hours and be bored out of my mind and be face to face than to sit and stare at a computer screen. But again, my question is, how do we fix that if the students aren't understanding what they're learning and an email's not helping them either if we go all virtual? Thank you.
Going once, going twice? Okay. Well, let's start. Let's go ahead and transition into board comment. So, one thing I'd like to, I know I wrote down a couple questions that I heard as the themes here. What I'd like to start with, I think, and maybe you can have some comment about this commentary, is you know, the changes that we as a board have made and how we got to this point. And I think there's been some concern about lack of leadership as a theme here. And I personally want to address that, and I think you all should be given the opportunity to address that to the public. I want to be clear on something here. I understand that there is concern about, you know, what may be projected as some wavering here and lack of leadership, but I want you to understand that what I'm most concerned about here is the fact that this virus is fluid. It's not static. There's a lot of information being thrown out there on a day-to-day basis, and I want everybody to understand that our decisions are made based on that fact, okay? So you may think there's an agenda here, call it what you want. I'm not here to stand that there is an agenda. I just want everyone to vocalize what their feelings on this are. Yes, we talked about the 50 mark that was discussed. A lot of things were discussed at that last board meeting. We had a very broad health and safety plan that we enacted. The 50 mark, I think, is something that needs to be looked at, personally. And that's where I kind of think we need to be. And I think Mr. Monkel kind of put it that way too, that as a healthcare provider, what I'm seeing is data that is, you know, the hospital is not full of sick individuals like I saw in April and May. We're seeing trends downward. Now, whether that trend continues or whether that trend maybe goes up a little bit, we'll see. We have to get to that. But the point is, I think we're at a situation now that was much different than 3 weeks ago. And to be fair, lastly, the metrics that were set aside by the health and safety plan were from guidance from St. Luke's. I appreciate that. We looked at metrics that at 1.25 to 50, we made a change from 10 to 50 to stay in the hybrid. We kept the 50 mark. It was discussed a little bit at the last meeting, I believe. And we just didn't get a consensus to that, because again, there's a lot going on at that meeting, okay? So I don't think lack of leadership, in my opinion, is the right word here. I take some offense to that, to be quite honest. What I think what we are doing here is looking at a situation where now we have data that supports that these numbers, even though we're looking at Berks County as at 51 or 52 mark, we're also seeing local data that is well below that, you know, in the 20 range, okay? So my personal, I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to kind of make that statement, and if anybody wants to discuss that or have any comment to that, please do from a board standpoint.
I mean, I concur with Mr. Tomasi. I mean, one of the biggest things I think that is kind of getting lost is the fact that the 100 number that we're talking about is county numbers. We're not talking about community numbers. If we had 100 new cases in our community, there wouldn't be a conversation. So the conversation about, you know, doing what's right for the kids or being unsafe, that's kind of unfair to the board and to the administration. Because really what we're saying is that in the county, we shouldn't be affected by stuff that happens farther away from us. When we got that 100 number 2 weeks ago, like Mr. Tomasi said, we have board members that are of different jobs. We all do different things. Trying to process that amount of information and trying to process those numbers when you have literally 2 hours and you've got a bunch of competing opinions and ideas and comments coming at you is a difficult task. I'm proud of my colleagues that we've decided to come here and have this second meeting. I mean, you can say we're flip-flopping, you can say we're being hypocritical, but the reality is, I'm going to quote the Beastie Boys, I'm going to quote MCA. I'd rather be a hypocrite than keep doing the wrong thing. all right? So that's my biggest issue is that, we gotta make sure that we understand that there are different policies here. And the community also needs to educate themselves on what our health and safety policy is. Because we also have a policy or an item within that policy that dictates what happens if something happens at our schools, all right? That is a very different policy than not arbitrary, but a community number, right? Or pardon me, a county number, all right? What's going on in our school, that is not something we will flip-flop on. That is not something that is open for discussion or debate. But if we've got 20 cases in our community and there's, we're kind of getting lambasted by Reading or by, Fleetwood or whatever, we need to, as the local, community government, really kind of try and say, you know what, we need to look at this instead. One other thing, I forget the gentleman who said it. I'm sorry. Mr. Housman. I would love to tell you that we would be able to do something along those lines of, pushing it off a week. But the reality is when we get to that point, you kind of have to make the decision at that point. But the one thing that I will say is with a 4-week rolling average, no one should really be caught unaware by this. So if we move that number to 100 and we have a 4-week rolling average and you see that number approaching 80 or 90, we all kind of know where that might go. And I think that people have to start making some concessions or some plans at that point. So hopefully it's not something that I think you want to hear, but it is something that I think you'll have more lead time if we go with the 4 weeks.
I do want to say something too about this meeting tonight. We didn't just decide to have this meeting. There was an outcry for us to get together and rediscuss this, what's going on here. It's not that we just decided to change numbers. There was so many community families that spoke up and asked us to look at this, as you can see for everyone here tonight. So it's not just something that we are making up and going off of. We are listening to the people who we are representing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, someone else asked, we should answer that, I'm sorry. It was, I wrote down the numbers thing. It was also, I know when we talked about this, keeping it at 50, it was from the hospital guidance, but it was also what the state had done in the beginning. And we weren't given any guidance when we first decided on those numbers.
Right.
Because during the August 3rd meeting, we had no guidance, no numbers to go off of. So that was our best guess based on how the government, how counties were reopening, and then what that was given. But then when the state, or the Department of Education and the Department of Health came out, we were given more guidance, which.
Right, and to be fair, those numbers came out right before the last meeting. So I think a lot of us, we discussed it in some detail, but we didn't really have a chance to digest that data and see what has happened within the community, to be fair, from my lens, I would say.
And Mr. Fonsi, if I can, I think I give the board a lot of credit because the reason we're here tonight is because you're using data to make decisions. There's other schools that when the state came out and said you have to reopen, here's the guidelines. The last 500 school districts figure it out. And other school districts are kind of shooting from the hip, and they're not using data. And so, to Mrs. Eisenhart's point, you did a good job of outlining the history of how we got here, because we weren't given those data metrics to start. We had to find those data metrics. We all invested in, let's use numbers, let's use data to make a decision, which we did. We came up with our own, and then the state, as Mr. Fonsi just pointed out, after we created those, they came up and said, hey, you can use now a threshold of 10. We can go as low as 10, or we can go all the way up to 100. And so they did, this was a guideline, someone asked us a mandate, or it's a guideline. So we can pick anything in between. We decided to stay with the 50 at that point. And now we're reevaluating that at this point, which is again, it's like how you pointed out, that we're going to have this meeting to talk about. But I just wanted to point out kind of put this high level and say, we're still making decisions with data. We are now using our data because that's determined what is that cutoff point. That's the reason why this decision is here.
Yeah.
Thank you for using data.
Another thing, just so the public can be aware, when we came up with this plan, we all decided that this isn't a set in stone plan. We need to be able to be fluid with it and to change it when needed. And we put that, we all discussed that and said that because every week something comes out, every week something is different. And to give our kids the best opportunity, we need to be able to change based on what we are learning and what we know.
Mr. Bucket, I just think one of the comments that kind of something was sticking with me, and I apologize for taking other board members' time, but there was a couple comments about staff having the opportunity for other leaves, and that is absolutely correct. I just want to make sure that, I think as board members, we all realize this, but our staff, our teachers are critical to our process. Everyone has said it's so important to be here. It's so important to be here because of our teachers. We have phenomenal staff. They have went above and beyond to get us to this point, to be able to sit here today and say, let's stay open longer. So I just want to make sure that, I know as a board we all feel that way, but as a public comment, I want to just say, we have a phenomenal staff. They have been awesome to work with along the way and have got us to this awesome thing. So I just want to make sure on behalf of myself, the administrative team, and I believe the board, we have a phenomenal level on that.
And there was questions, I just want to kind of address some of the questions. Data metrics spikes, we talked about before, we rolling average and discussed the possibility that with the full 4 weeks, we could certainly have the ability to see some of the peaks and valleys and give us a little bit more data. That is, again, I think Mr. Cheech, you mentioned that is data that is rolling, so we would be transitioning and dropping weeks as time goes on to go to that current situation. So let's see what else, what other questions that we have. So about changing the plan, we were talking about that. Mr. Bucket, can you talk a little bit more about when we transition plans, make decisions on plans, like when one model to the next based on whatever metric we decide to act on today?
Yeah, so there was a question about how do we transition back? And it is clearly articulated in our health and safety plan what we do in the case of moving from, if we have to go virtual and go back to yellow, how that will look. And so what is written is if the numbers indicate a positive trend and there are fewer cases, the board will make adjustments to move to a less restrictive phase at the next regularly scheduled board meeting or as needed. So it gives the board the opportunity at the next board meeting. The board meets typically the first Monday of every month. So if for some reason tomorrow we would go into a virtual environment, then we would have that opportunity at the next board meeting to talk about it, to analyze the data, and the board at that point can decide if we want to move back into the yellow phase or if we want to stay where we are because the data is indicating that it's still not okay to reopen or move back into a less restrictive phase. So that's what's written in our plan right now. Again, it is presented at the next regular scheduled board meeting with the caveat that it also could be done as needed if something would cause us to meet earlier, like a special meeting like this, and decide to change the plan to a less restrictive environment. So that's the transition plan, that's the standard written in the health and safety plan that we go to the one last board meeting as we discussed this process.
Andrew, do you want to go over, I think a lot of people are confused, you know, in the red model, our full virtual model. I think people are really confused and think that it's the same thing that we did last March. And if you can explain that it's something totally different, they will have a teacher present, blah, blah, blah. Did you want to go into that? Or?
Yeah, as a high level, the model that we used in the spring was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to this state closed in front of them. So we decided to do what in education we call an asynchronous environment, where we give all the data, we give the work or the school work to the students. They do it and turn it into the teacher, and then the teacher is there for support. We call it office hours. The plan this fall, if we would go into the red phase, is more of what we call a synchronous environment, where teachers will actually be doing live teaching with the students of the lessons. We feel that that's really important. We thought that last fall or last spring worked well, but as we evaluated this and we had more time to plan and prepare for it, this spring, or this fall, if we would happen to go into a virtual or red phase, it would be live teaching sessions that the teachers would be doing with the students. And that way it better connects with the students. It's still not quite the same as being in person, but we feel it's critical to have those connections with the students on a regular basis.
Any other board comments?
I just have a couple. As we move forward here, I went back today and I looked through data from Berks County, 2-week rolling averages from April, May, back when we started making these decisions. Or I should say when the administration started their plan. Back in April, if I'm correct, the 2-week rolling average earlier mid-April was probably like 363. You move into May, it dropped to 200. So as we move forward, obviously it's been dropping. And to some extent, I agree with going to the 100. My only problem, I would say, would be at most of that time, Pennsylvania was locked down, okay? Kids weren't together. You didn't have, at least I didn't, maybe some of you did, I don't know. I didn't send my kid to a sleepover. I wouldn't send my kid to another kid's house. Everybody stayed at home. We did what we had to do. Now we're putting kids into a school, and I agree with only half of them going in. I love that idea. But I don't really think that we have the metrics of what kids in school for a long period of time would be. I'm not saying the 100 plan is wrong. I'm just saying, do we have enough information to necessarily change what we set forth? From what I'm hearing from my colleagues, probably. But I worry about what it will look like in another month when these kids go back. Like, say like a hamburger went back full send green. What will that look like in 4 to 6 weeks? We don't know. But do we modify our plan before we even know that model? I don't know. I'm 50-50 on it. And I want to thank all the public for coming out. I read, I think I got a total of 45 emails. There was some students, I'm going to say there was 4 or 5 students who, they were pretty upset that we didn't go red when we said we were going red. There was, I think, close to 40 that are on the 100 wagon, which I'm almost there myself, looking at past data and how we've dropped. But I will say this, I urge you all, as you're here now, come to our academic presentation. Come to when we have budget meetings, learn where, all the money goes, why it goes, and not just the things like this. So I appreciate all the emails.
I'll echo that. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We wish, as board members, that we have this level of participation at every meeting on many of the topics that we debate and discuss, because then we know that you really care, and we do. I think collectively as a board, I'm not just speaking for myself, we do really want to actively listen. You're our constituents. We're not just giving our personal opinions here, but we're doing our best to represent sort of the broader public. This topic is so powerful. It is public health, we're talking about population health. This isn't about our individual families, our individual kids only. This is about our community and the broader picture. And as a result, it forces us to not be selfish in our decision making. So that just keep in mind, at least I remind myself every time we're forced to make a decision or have to make a decision, that it's not just about me and what I think. In this instance, it's about the greater good. I don't think there's a person in this room, both audience members, clearly there was a common theme about interest in getting and staying in the buildings. I don't think there's one of us on stage that doesn't want that. We want that for our children. There's no question, and please don't hesitate for a moment to believe that that is what we want. The issue becomes, how do we do that without putting the community and families and children and staff and administrators and parents and grandparents at risk? To the point that folks have already made, it's fluid, we don't have all the answers, we've learned a lot since the spring until now. We're gonna continue every single day to learn a lot. So I'm on the fence with this issue of who you made a decision, stick with it, versus, you know, be responsive and reactive. It's a dynamic plan, it's not a static plan. I see both. It is challenging to be whiplash, and we're potentially about to whiplash people. That's never fun. By the same token, things are changing every single day, and I think good leadership does reflect the growth mindset that someone used as a term, and being responsive and adaptive. One of the ways in my mind that we continue to enable the hybrid model or the full green model is with conservative decision making right now. If we start loosening up too soon, too aggressively, I'm very concerned that it will blow back in our faces, and recovering from that will be far more difficult. What I mean by that, it is much easier to go to green. It is much easier to go to red than it is to go to green in terms of runway. You don't need any runway to go to red. If there's an outbreak, we will have to pull the trigger with 0 lead time. And then getting out of red will be very, very difficult. If we stay in yellow, kind of, you know, medium, if we push to green and it fails, again, it is very difficult to recover from that. So my bias tends to be, let's continue to be open to feedback, monitor the data, look at the numbers, but a conservative approach will give us the opportunity to go long. More aggressive approach may blow the whole thing up pretty fast. So I have more comments and a number of questions, but I'll stop there and let others respond.
And I just want to say, I feel fully confident in the health and safety plan as presented, Andrew, in regards to what is in that plan that's keeping our children's staff safe. You guys put a lot of effort, all the different committees that have been involved in that building of that plan. I agree that thing was very concrete, well thought out plan. You brought multiple stakeholders to this, and I applaud you for forward thinking on that. And quite frankly, personally, I feel like I am totally on board with the safety. Understanding that plan is safe, very safe in my opinion. Spacing the kids out, making sure we have cleaning processes in place, making sure that the building is clean, making sure that it's sterilized, you know, on a nightly basis. All those things are occurring. So I personally feel very comfortable with the safety aspects of that plan. With that being said, we do have specific guidelines that we are following when it comes to kids or staff in our building that may potentially get sick. This is not a willy-nilly made-up thing that we as the board are just going to be reactive to. We are giving our superintendent the full ability to, with the guidance of local health department and Department of Health, to make decisions on if, God forbid, we get to that point, how we close. And that's, in my opinion, more the issue that we're gonna be tasked with down the road, that he's gonna be tasked with down the road. When is that decision made? And we even kind of discussed this as a group, like at the last meeting, like, you know, what are you gonna do to ensure that that's gonna happen? And you've given us confidence in your response to say, we're gonna follow the Department of Health, we're gonna follow their guidelines, and I'm not gonna be quick to get that information out to the public. And unfortunately, have to make maybe a decision that we hope never comes. So to be clear, we are in the intermediate phase based on the state, okay? So in other words, if we have a case in our building that occurs at any given time, one student, one staff, one building, we have guidelines in place to say we clean, we do things, they're all there, they're all out there for you. The other thing that I would say is if we get to a point where we have more than one kid in a building, we have guidelines there. And it goes on and on up. So if we get to that point, that's going to be the scenario. That's going to be the situation where we make, you make decisions to close like that, and it's going to be a potentially long period of time. And there's no leeway on that. There's absolutely no leeway. We as a board will not support that. We need to get that information out quickly, responsibly, and we have to do the right thing. Okay, so
what we have, just to reiterate that point, what we have in our health and safety plan is wording that says that we will follow the Pennsylvania Department of Education, quote, responding to COVID cases at school framework, and work directly with the Department of Health guidance. That framework that Mr. Tomasi is talking about illustrates in a table format what we will do if there's cases, and articulates the number of cases and what the action plans are to be with the school district. And then again, through the Department of Health, FEMA, and Department of Education, they've developed a hotline for school districts to work through cases as they like to know, if that would happen to happen. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for that safety.
Our policy is if we go red, any PIAA sports we have are canceled, is that correct?
That's how we have it written in our health and safety plan, yes.
We're here tonight to vote just on these two. I mean, we're not, we've approved our health and safety plan. I feel like we're starting to circle back around again back to health and safety plan. Like, can we move forward now?
Sure. I just want to give everybody comments to make sure that we're listening.
Yeah, I understand. You're saying we're following the Department of Health and the Department of Education guidelines, but yet the guidelines that they put out for the numbers, everyone is not wanting to follow. That's where, and that's what at the last meeting was, that's what I wanted as well. If we're going to follow the guidelines, we'll follow the guidelines. So we keep harping, we're following all these guidelines, yet we're not. We're being very conservative, and right now that's, we should shut down. We shouldn't have let any of our kids come back to school. So by making a number that we wanted to use instead of following guidelines.
So for me, I think it would be helpful, I don't know if others, would you, Mr. Potter, recap where did the number 50 come from that was your recommendation to the board several weeks ago, the first draft of the health and safety plan that the board approved? There was a comment earlier that we use guidance from a variety of sources, including our relationship folks at St. Luke's. So would you kind of just backtrack us a little bit and give us a history of how did we get to 50 and why did we land there? Why was that your recommendation at the time?
So when we first met, and I believe the first meeting was always to present the health and safety plan, I felt it was critical that we develop some kind of metric in that plan presented to the board that has data included, so we had some clear comments. At that point in time, there was no data available. I contacted the Department of Health, I contacted the Department of Education, and both of them kind of pointed me at each other, and none of them were willing to give data. So we then started to do some of our own research and found that the state used the cut point of 50 per 100,000 as a way to release all the counties back from the red phase, when everyone was red, into the yellow phase. So that was our metric that the state had, that was the state adopted metric to move counties from red into yellow. They never adopted a yellow to green metric. So we used that 50 as ours, and then we talked with St. Luke's as our medical department for the school district, and they validated that, you know, and even they validated when we looked at the broader PPE piece of it. They said that that's a good conservative number that follows what the state was recommending, and that recommending when they had moved from the red to the yellow. And they fully admitted that there's nothing else to move from at that point when we had presented that in August. So there was no other data metrics out there. So that's when we had that looked at the plan and said, well, let's use the 0 to 25 for green, 25 for 50. Again, that was based off what PD did and the health guidance. So that's how we got to the 50. And then when we subsequently went to the August 17th meeting, that's when, as we kind of rehashing this, but Mr. Mossy mentioned that the PD guidance came out, whether that was like right before or right after that meeting, I forget what it was, but it didn't really give any time for us to evaluate that data. So we then decided to maintain that 50 at that point. And kind of why we circled back today to say, okay, we need to reevaluate that. And I think what the questions have been there.
So to clarify, we started at 50 because we did some of our own research and then got it validated by the medical professional partnership folks and some others. We didn't move to 100 when the Pennsylvania Department of Education came out with 100 because of a time frame issue. We were voting on revisions to the health and safety plan, essentially the Monday after the Friday that statistic from PE changed to 100, correct?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Very limited time frame for us to respond or react.
Right, but we still had that medical guidance to say, yeah, use it.
And the 100 from PPE has been issued and on the table, so to speak, as consistent guidance for several weeks now?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure what you were.
Just, in other words, it hasn't changed. They haven't moved it
No.
back to 50 and they haven't moved it to 500.
That's correct.
It's been consistently at 100 since it was issued several weeks ago.
That's correct.
Okay. And I lost my train of thought. Bear with me a sec. And they're not hearing from PDT or getting any inklings, if you will, that that's about to change.
No.
Okay, there's no indicators that he's about to move that number.
That's correct. At this point, everything is pointing to still making that 10 to 100 in the yellow phase.
Okay. So with that in mind, can we clarify also, we are using a Berks County number. There's been some question as to, is that too broad of a number? And why haven't we considered using a more local number? Can you clarify for folks why we chose not to just focus on the zip codes that our district students and families reside in?
Yeah, so I'm actually trying to pull the Pennsylvania Department of Education guidance up real quick, but the Pennsylvania Department of Education guideline with that 10 to 50, 10 to 100 range that was out there, has not been, says states in there, we use the county guide, use the county data. And so we adopted that as, again, when you go back to history revision list, that was what moved us from a red to a yellow, as the governor's 50 cut point, supported by medical guidance, and then they still continue to, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, with their information now, continue to use that county data metric as that company.
Okay, but again, just to be crystal clear, PDE, Pennsylvania Department of Education guidance is to use county data, for school districts to use county data, not local data, and to use the metric as of the last couple of weeks of 100 cases per 100,000.
That's correct.
Okay, and then there was also a comment from the audience about positivity testing. like the positivity rate. And there was a question about, what are we looking at that? And I think you do share that data with us, but we did not factor that in as a decision trigger in Brandywine's health and safety plan as of now.
That's right. So at this point, we do have a goal in our plan that should be taken into consideration, but it's part of that overall discussion. Where we're focusing more on the bullet point, and then the percent of positivity rate should be under the 5%.
Okay, so hopefully that helps clarify. I think this is factual. With Kutztown University in our close proximity, there are going to be more and more tests occurring for young people. I don't think it's a safe assumption, and if I misinterpreted the comment, I apologize, but I just want to be clear. I don't think it's a safe assumption to assume that only people who are symptomatic get tested. That is certainly not my experience, and in fact, that's, I think the more tests aren't an indicator of whether you're symptomatic or not. The outcome of those tests is what needs to be focused on, not the volume of tests, but the outcome of those tests, positive or negative. So I just want to clarify that comment as well. And what is St. Luke's current position? Have we asked them, given the fact that PE has issued a statement a couple of weeks ago of not 50 but 100, did St. Luke's revise their opinion, or did they challenge PE? Do we have an update from St. Luke's, our medical program?
So at this point, the guidance that we still have been getting from St. Luke's is that they have looked at this, they realize that the state has moved, and that they weren't as willing to give us a straight cut point number. They said if you still go with the 50, that is more conservative approach and obviously the safer approach to the process. That's what they had mentioned, that they were not looking. They couldn't give us a recommendation to say 50 or 100. They kind of left them up to the school districts to make that local decision. Again, with them thinking that the less the number, if we use 50 in our conversations, then that would be more of a conservative approach.
Okay, so they didn't really opine about it, they just reiterated the facts, which is the lower your number, the safer and more conservative, the higher your number, the more aggressive and potentially less safe. Okay, thanks.
I would just like to echo earlier that I'm encouraged by the involvement by the community and would welcome that for any meeting going forward. It's amazing to hear the voices of the people we represent, and I do encourage that moving forward. And just as history as far as board and leadership, when we made this decision, we had very little data, and more data has come subsequently. But when we made this decision, we were all in a unified front on this decision with one nay vote. So I just wanted to make that clear that it was a decision that the board carried. Dr. Carter's not here, and that's one no vote for the 50 number. So it was something that all of the board had a consensus of and took into consideration both the safety of the students and the faculty based on the numbers that were presented and the data that was in our hands at the time of that decision.
So I have a clarifying question again, triggered by the audience. So again, great feedback. Someone spoke about how they used our plan to make decisions about their family, and that the district had asked them with rather urgent turnaround time, understandably so, to commit to a 5-month time frame for whether their kids would be taking classes in the building if that was an option, or going virtual by choice in that family. So to follow up on that person's question, should the board tonight approved what's been proposed, or put forth as a motion anyway, can a family now switch in response to the board's changed decision? How does the administration feel about that, and what is your plan to accommodate families who are now maybe in whiplash a little bit?
Well, that's the next part about our virtual academy, is that it is fluid. There will be we're only 2 days into instruction, so we still will be able to enroll students into the virtual academy. If that's the case, we just ask families to be a little bit flexible and patient, and we would be able to transition and enroll them, because we also have started up all the other students that are now in that process. And so from a staff perspective, we can actually absolutely accommodate that. We just have to limit patients to be able to facilitate that process.
Okay, so while we kind of ask for a 5-month commitment, again, we're saying, should a family want to change their minds, we will be, to the best degree possible, flexible and accommodate their needs to change as well.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And I just, I can't promise this is my last, but while I've got the floor, so the comment about faculty, and Mr. Potter, I really appreciate that comment about the staff. And I agree with the audience members, several of you who commented about the robust benefits and options that the teachers and staff and administrators here at Brandywine have. There's no question that it's a robust benefit package. But the comment, I bristle at the comment saying that if staff is that uncomfortable, they should just go get another job. And yet, these are the same staff and faculty that you're relying on to enforce the policies and to keep your kids safe. So it's a very difficult balance between supporting faculty and kind of saying, hey, you don't like it here, go get yourself another job. We try really hard here at this district, and I think we've been reasonably successful over quite a few union contracts and other negotiations of trying to strike a balance between being really supportive and attentive to the needs of our faculty and staff, because without them, none of this works, and none of our kids are happy in school, and none of them are getting good education. So I don't want a faculty or staff member at Brandywine to think for an instant that this board is dismissive in any way to their voice or to their needs and to their safety.
Thank you, Mrs. Shue. Very good point. Okay, any other comments? Okay. Take a roll call, please. This is, again, this is 1A to approve the 50 for 100,000 to the 100 for 100,000 for safe reopening. So 1A. You see that? Okay.
Is there any appetite from the board to considering a number other than 100? And the reason the answer is no is based on we're aligned your ideas and you're aligned to.
We are following guidelines, follow the guidelines.
Okay, and does that then, with that philosophy, is it reasonable to assume then that if PPE comes out tomorrow with a number that says 42, that this board would reconvene immediately and move to 42?
I think that's a kind of inflammatory statement. Like, are they really going to? I mean.
But if we're gonna follow the guidelines, we're gonna follow the guidelines.
Yes, fine. I'm not opposed to it, but I just think that we can't just make up numbers. I mean, if we're going to, I was told last meeting, we're following guidelines, and then we get to this one point, and it's, yeah, I'll just kind of.
So that's kind of why I'm asking, because I'm trying to understand, is our philosophy, as we make this decision, to embrace following guidelines? And if we vote yes to that, are we then also sort of suggesting or locking ourselves into some level to follow the guidelines, even when they don't support what we personally want, or what the community wants, or what our friends and family members? Do you see what I mean? I'm just trying to get a gauge of what my colleagues here, if we're following the guidelines, then that means we follow them when we like it, when it's favorable to our opinion. But we also respond and react just as quickly and aggressively if it comes out different.
I don't love any of the guidelines, and I'm still learning them. So.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I kind of echo Ms. Eisenberg. That's a bit of an inflammatory statement, the 42. I mean, what are we going to do if a meteor hits the school tomorrow? We're going to have to shut down. We're going to have to go fully virtual. No, hold on 1 second. I'm not done.
Yeah, it's not
Okay,
inflammatory at all. It's a bad example.
Okay. So, I mean, the reality is, like I said, I feel that if they did change to 42, yes, we'd have to reconvene, and yes, we would have to come up with another number because we're not in line with what they're doing. The reality is the board is operating under emergency powers because we started doing that back when we started doing our virtual meetings. I've been on this board, you've been on this board over 10 years. We've never had to use emergency powers for anything. This is one of those situations that I think I would ask the community to be understanding. And I think as a board member, we have to understand this is fluid. We are going to be put in uncomfortable situations. We're going to get asked to make uncomfortable decisions. And we just have to do our best. And at this point, I mean, realistically, we didn't have enough time to process the information with that 100 number at the last meeting. We've had an opportunity to process it. At this point, we've had an opportunity to reach out and get other resources involved to get better data. And I think this is the best decision that we can make right now. Fixating on why everybody wants to do it, although I understand some people need that to process, I don't think it really helps the conversation at this point.
Well, I respectfully appreciate your comments. For me, as a decision maker, it absolutely is material. The basis or rationale behind which this board is making a decision is absolutely pertinent to me. So that when I walk out of here, I can live with my vote, whether I support it or I don't. So I'm trying to read my colleagues and understand, why are we making this decision? If the answer is to align ourselves with PDE, then the next question in my mind is, that means it would be reasonable for folks to expect us to follow PDE in the future if it goes in a direction we don't like. So I'm trying to read that. It was not meant to be inflammatory. I'm struggling with this decision. My advice is not to change and put people at risk, but I'm also trying desperately to listen to folks who have young kids in school that they want to be in school. So I'm trying to get comfortable being able to say yes to this. So not inflammatory in any way.
And I appreciate your thought process, and I appreciate how you come to your decision. However, there's also other board members out there that might be uncomfortable being asked or being felt like they're being put on the spot to give a justification. And that's all I'm trying to make. And incidentally, we're all decision makers at this table, so everybody's decision-making process is different. That's all my statement was meant to convey.
Okay, and if you're uncomfortable, don't answer my question. I'm just looking for anybody who's willing to share with me what your thought process on this is and what your appetite for if we honor PDE's guidance. You all get that in my mind that means we honor it whether we like it in the future or whether we don't.
I think you also said something that, we don't make these decisions like based on ourselves. We can't be selfish with these decisions. So we're making a decision for families, telling them we have to follow these guidelines, yet we're not. And that's where I have to struggle with it. And that's why I tried to get some clarification last meeting that, because I knew when we left here, I knew people were gonna ask me, well, if you're following all the other guidelines, why did you make up this number? And that's why I didn't agree with what we were doing. And for me to go back and to now say, we are following all the guidelines, here's why. And that's where I feel. And yeah, and I don't love the guidelines, but that's what I have to do. I have to make a decision for the people who I'm, it's not necessarily about me. So that's.
And we're not far apart, just so you recognize that. I had that same concern. The answer in my mind to the question of why did we make a different decision than the guidelines was because our medical partner, St. Luke's, had recommended 50. So in my mind, that's how I answered that same question, but I struggled with it as well.
Yeah, I just didn't want you to think I just I only want to follow the guidelines that I like. I don't, I would follow any guideline if we decide to do that.
So-
I've been very comfortable. I've been like this way, I've been all over the place with you. But I think as we're trying to make a decision for everyone, like for my own sake, I've already made up in my mind. If I start to feel uncomfortable with that, I'll put my kids in the first got me out, whatever. It's up to me. Everyone is all over the place with my kids. Some people think it's close, you know what I mean? So I think we just have to do whatever is best for the whole entire,
Yeah, well, there's no question. I mean, we're doing our campus, right? We're trying to do what's best for the community, and that's why, for me personally, I'm on the fence. And that's why I was asking, is there any way we could negotiate? Do we have to double from 50 to 100, or can we go to 75, for example? It's not aligned with Pennsylvania PDE, but it's more aggressive than today, and it gives us a little more runway should the trend continue to go in a way that's unfavorable for the next week or two. In fact, I just got a news flash, and I didn't open it, but I came across the street and it says, while Pennsylvania numbers look better, Berks County numbers are getting worse. And I'd love to understand why is that? What's happening in Berks County all of a sudden in the last 2 weeks that's making the trend look negative right at the time when we're making a decision that goes counter to that trend? Yeah, maybe it keeps changing. Yeah. But that's my concern too. If we go to 100, will we be back here in 2 weeks?
I think if we stick to their guidelines, that's it. We have to stay the course.
And to reiterate, when we originally made this decision, 50 was not an arbitrary number. It was a number that Andrew did extensive research on and developed with St. Luke's guidance. Prior to that decision, or post that decision, the state came out with different guidelines. At the time when we voted on the 50, we all voted yes, with the exception of Dr. Carter, so we were all in agreement, and now the guidelines changed. This is a fluid process. Anyone who would have thought there would have been a virus back in January and March, it's unexpected. Everything about this is unexpected, and now you can't plan. I mean, there's no way you can plan. What you can do is put the best foot forward here and put the process in place that we have. And be willing to make changes at that. We're going to follow policies. I think it's important for the constituents to know that we're going to follow the policies that are laid forward by the recommendations put forward by the Department of Education. And that's what we're going to follow. So, I know you're not throwing arbitrary numbers out, but if they say, okay, it's getting bad, we're going to have to drop that number 42. Our constituents need to know that's what we're going to follow, and I value that question that you put forth, because that's important. It's just not, we hear everyone's concerns that they want the kids to stay in school. Yes, that's important. But we also have to be open to the safety of everyone involved. Not just in the school itself, but to the teachers, to the community members, to the multi-generational families that we serve, and to the grandparents who watch the kids. There's a much larger picture here, no different than a mask. A mask, do I need to wear a mask? No, but it's to benefit others as well. So, it's a community thing. So, to answer that question as far as how I feel, we're going to follow guidelines. We're going to base it on the 100 which we have now as new information. and we follow those guidelines. And if the state comes back and say it has to be different, well, then we call another emergency meeting and do exactly what we're doing. We have to be fluid in a process that this virus is an unknown creature.
And Mr. Wagner, to that point, I appreciate the 50 number. Ms. Liza, I think you mentioned earlier that this is a fluid document. We mentioned that from the beginning. If there are changes that come from the Department of Education, has to adjust our policy. It says right in the policy, we have to approve that and resubmit it to Pennsylvania Department of Education. So that, to answer the question about will we follow this, yeah, I have to bring those guidelines, that updated information to the board to reconsider and then resubmit to the PDE. I just want to make sure we have one thing clear on the guideline process. Right now, the Department of Ed says we can basically use everything from 11 to 100. That's what it says right now. So when we say we're following the guidelines, you threw an arbitrary number of 42 out. We still pick that, but we still follow the Pennsylvania Department of Education guideline, which is why the 50 was accepted, because that was the middle of the road. The 100 is the high end of it, which is not about 20. And all those within that are acceptable guidelines within what the Department of Education is outlining right now. And if there's changes to that, then I will absolutely bring that back to this board. We'll talk about it and we'll make adjustments. This isn't a hard set in stone document. And just, I hate to belabor the point, but just to illustrate that, when the Department of Education came out and said, here's the new mask guidelines, they also said, you have to adjust your health and safety plan, reapprove it, and send it back into us. So that is the level of detail and guidance that we're getting from the Department of Education when these things come out. So as a reassurance, we will provide that information.
Appreciate that. So one clarifying question, because my decision just changed. The PDE guidance goes from 11 to 100?
That's correct.
Okay. I was not aware of that. Thank you.
That's the window for yellow.
Okay.
Roll call.
Yes.
Mr. Shields?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
No.
Mrs. Walter? Yes. Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mrs. Henry?
Yes.
Mrs. Hill?
No.
Mr. Jamal?
Yes.
6 days, 2 days, 4
Okay, moving on to B, this is looking at the 4-week rolling average. I think we kind of clarified that, specific, what that means. Is there any public comment on that or concerns to be brought forth? If not, any more discussion on this matter?
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Sheets?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Walter? Yes. Mrs. Henry?
Yes.
Mrs. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Jamal?
Yes.
8 days, 1
Under Roman number 2, other business, any public comments? Any further board discussion? Okay. All right, Roman numeral 3, adjournment. Motion made by Mr. Wagner.
Second.
Second by Mr. You adjourned.
All right.
I really like these boulders.
Oh. He was supposed to wear a more.
Oh, yeah, that's.